Hello everyone, my name is Brian Bell, and I'm going to introduce a Reader's Advisory Training Program for the Bloomfield Public Library. So first off, the introduction. So the following information I'm going to discuss is provided for the library manager of the Bloomfield Public Library to review. Since under the administrative direction, the library manager holds a variety of responsibilities, such as planning and organizing existing policies, along with staff training. Therefore, this presentation addresses why your library manager should consider adding Reader's Advisory training to their library reference staff. So what is Reader's Advisory Learning Services? The authors Joyce Sarix and Nancy Brown wrote the groundbreaking book Reader Advisory Services in the Public Library, which defines Reader's Advisory as RA services, which we'll call RA services moving forward, as a patron-oriented library service for adult fiction readers. So some would simply say that Reader's Advisory Services means librarians helping mostly adults readers find books that match their reading tastes. But as decades have gone on, Reader's Advisors have expanded the meaning of the term to include more formats. So these formats would include audiobooks and ebooks and other media like movies and music. So what we call this now is the whole collection RA. I would assume that the Bloomfield Public Library has many different mediums and formats of material in their collection, so you can see that this would be very helpful for RA services. So the history of introducing RA services into the American libraries has been a very challenging endeavor. So RA services before 1940 have largely been non-existent, as some of the earliest librarians did not believe that helping patrons find books fell within their job description. These librarians in the past felt RA services is simply not a priority in American libraries because its advocates have failed to convince library administrators and public officials that reading for pleasure is a good thing in itself, requiring no higher goal to justify it. If RA services were truly a priority in libraries, training in the area would be mandatory, and it is not. So that's why I'm here. This is what I believe the Bloomfield Public Library should introduce a Reader's Advisory training program for the librarian staff. So the research I have gathered here has shown that various benefits of using RA services in public libraries is very helpful. This would include helping patrons find materials they want to read, listen to, or view for pleasure. Also introducing patrons to the library's entire collection, such as multimedia and digital formats like audiobooks, film, music, and ebooks. But it's important to understand that the RA service is trying to narrow down a patron's option of materials available and provide them with the best match for them. This would also provide a collection of reader guides and other relevant tools for patrons to find future material on their own. So how are other libraries using RA services? The New York Public Library. The New York Public Library uses RA services on their website. The website features an excellent Reader's Advisory blog called Bibliophile, which is about books, reading, and literature. For everything from best books lists to various genres such as romance, horror, science fiction, and even banned books. And the Seattle Public Library uses RA services. They use a specific form-based service called Your Next 5 Books, which was developed and streamlined as a one-page form that many other libraries have since adopted as a model. So the Seattle Public Library, SPL, the form relies entirely on open questions that ask about the user's past, reading, and current mood, and allows for an answer of up to 2,500 characters. A single text box asks, tell our librarians about a few books or authors you've enjoyed and what you like about them. Also feel free to tell us about books you haven't liked and why. Teaching resources needed for RA services. So starting an RA service should focus on the teaching of communication skills for the library staff. This would include the proper interviewing steps and how to understand the reading experience the reader wants. As most librarians are aware of the reference interview, the RA interview can have significant differences. So I'm going to discuss that a little bit here. The most important teaching for the RA interview is how to communicate. As most reference interviews are aware of, communication is key. But the steps for an RA interview would include being approachable, treating the users and their preferences with complete respect, using appropriate skills of questioning and listening to find out what the user is really looking for, end with a conversation that the user needs has been understood in an invitation to return with another question. This is very similar to the reference interview, as you can see, but the RA interview is a little tweaked in the way you communicate with patrons. Here's a little good to know fact. Librarians should be taught and be aware that RA services is about what the patron would like, not what you like. This has been a big discussion with RA services. Most librarians would love to introduce their patrons to something that they enjoy, some of the literature they read, what they're interested in, maybe the movies they like, etc. But as an RA service, you need to not think about your needs or what you like, but what the patron needs and what the patron likes. Okay, let's discuss the tools for RA services. Currently, the tools available for the RA librarian now number in the hundreds, if not the thousands. So obviously I cannot discuss all the tools. However, the ideal tool for an RA service needs to be electronic in order to include all the necessary elements, and its titles should be linked to the library's catalog. This is very similar to databases, electronic databases, which most reference librarians are aware of. However, the tool also needs to have multiple access points, including access by genre, historical time period, setting, award categories, gender, and occupation of the protagonist. It should also cover both fiction and nonfiction and include plot summaries and reviews. So here I'll point out some of the top comprehensive electronic tools that are available for RA services, and these are my 4 that I recommend for the Bloomfield Public Library. Tool 1 is the library's unlimited genre reflecting advisory series. So this series is one of the most useful RA tools for librarians, and readers love it too. The next tool is EBSCO Novelist. This is the most comprehensive RA database out there, with over 200,000 adult fiction titles, more than 800,000 juvenile titles, and an optional nonfiction model. Its coverage is impressive. Then we have the tool FictionDB, which is a comprehensive database with more than 250,000 titles and complete bibliographies for over 50,000 authors. And the last tool for RA services is Goodreads, which is a largely crowdsourced site with countless lists that can be useful for readers' advisors. So what are the RA service outcomes? The hopeful outcome of introducing RA services to Bloomfield Public Library is focused on helping people find materials they want to read, listen to, or view for pleasure. That's the goal. Through librarians using the proper skills during the reader's advisory interview, we hope to provide a matchmaking service for your patrons. The Bloomfield Public Library has a great collection, and with the use of RA services, this should help patrons explore and enjoy the material. So the main point here is to really make sure your patrons have full access to the collection, with the librarians helping them and assisting them to find this. So here is an example of how an RA interview would work. The Bloomfield Public Librarian would begin a conversation with asking the patron specific questions. These questions would be very basic. Can I help you find a special book or movie for you? The librarian then would ask questions to find reading, viewing, listening patterns. What type of movies do you like to watch? Do you have a favorite author you enjoy reading? The librarian then would ask questions to determine the current patron preferences. What would be your favorite book subject to read today? The librarian would also ask questions in regard to the function and context of the material. What kind of experience do you want to get from this book? And finally, the librarian would ask follow-up recommendation questions. What kind of experience do you want to get from this book? Assessing reader advisory services. There are a variety of options to gather qualitative feedback from patrons based on the use of RA services. Personally, I would recommend the use of the READ scale, which was developed to gather reference statistics. The READ scale, reference effort assessment data, is available for any institution to use for free of charge and is a handy tool to calibrate and record the difference between reference transactions. Librarians are able to grade these transactions from taking little effort to high expertise, along with the time needed to perform RA services. And the summary. So I would personally like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss the importance of having a RA training at the Bloomfield Public Library. I believe the benefits of training your library reference staff on RA services would be of the utmost importance for your patrons. As I have discussed, there are a number of top comprehensive electronic tools available for RA services. I listed 4, and I think those are the best at the moment, but there's also tools to assess these transactions, like the read scale. Again, please reach out to me if you have any further questions on how to introduce RA services at your library. I appreciate your time, and thank you.